Welcome once again to Lehto's Law. Here's Steve Lehto.
We have an update to a story I did a while back, and a lot of people sent this to me. Thank you very much. Honolulu County employee fired after nearly 5 years of paid leave. And the story I did originally was this guy was being paid not to work because they'd put him on leave, but they were paying him. And the reason they put him on leave, they said, was they're investigating some wrongdoing, which made you wonder, well, shouldn't they just investigate and get to the bottom of it and make a decision? So the employee was paid not to work for years as officials considered what to do about his impossible mileage reports. And then they cut off the paycheck shortly after a local news organization, Honolulu Civil Beat, did a story about it. And so Christina Jedra has now written an update. And he was on leave for nearly 5 years while a misconduct investigation dragged on, but he's now been terminated. So he was an investigator in the Honolulu Prosecutor's office, was put on paid leave in October of 2020. He was accused of filing false mileage reimbursements totaling approximately $12,000. Over the course of an investigation that apparently took 1,751 days, he received even more than he was accused of stealing. His taxpayer-funded paychecks during his leave totaled over $300,000, according to city data, and his pay scale increased at least twice thanks to union raises. So he was not only getting paid, but he got raises. The case drew the public's ire after it was spotlighted in Civil Beat. The county issued him a termination letter 3 weeks later. So an employment attorney in Hawaii called the length of this leave ridiculous. It's clear evidence of incompetence or corruption. He didn't say which, could be either. Somebody needs to be fired. And he ain't talking about this guy. He's saying somebody else should be fired now, because when you put somebody on leave and say we're investigating this person for wasting money, whether they're stealing it or it's just incompetence, but they're wasting money somehow. Once you've paid them 3 or 4 years of salary, and the amount they're accused of misappropriating is less than that, it's counterproductive, it would seem. So the case is one of Hawaii's most egregious uses of the so-called stay-away pay, the practice of paying an employee not to work while a misconduct investigation plays out. Civil Beat investigated the practice last year and identified hundreds of employees in county and state agencies getting paid for months or even years after being accused of wrongdoing. Now, the unionized government workers can generally be put on 30 days of unpaid leave while a misconduct investigation pays out. But after that, the collective bargaining agreements require that paychecks resume whether or not the person is ordered back to work. So that should make it pretty obvious that you should try to resolve these things in 30 days. Does it really take longer than that? So the prosecuting attorney here declined to be interviewed for the story, citing an unspecified collective bargaining process that is ongoing in this case. However, in a statement, noted that the case began before he took office, and he was sorry it took so long. And that actually is a problem. And this is a nuance of the law many people don't put too much thought into. Prosecutors, depending on what level they're at and who they represent, whether it's, county prosecutor, city prosecutor, state prosecutor, some of those positions are elected. So it means that, let's suppose a prosecutor's office has a bunch of cases they're handling and an election comes up. And this prosecutor loses the election. Well, this prosecutor then is out. A new prosecutor comes in and has to look at all the cases they've got in front of them and go, okay, do I want to pursue these? And I've seen cases where a new prosecutor came in and goes, I don't like that case. I don't like that case. I do like this case over here that the previous prosecutor declined to prosecute, so we'll take that case up. And I've also seen it where prosecutors have come in and done things like fired the entire office, going to hire all new assistants, things like that. And it can throw the office into turmoil. So here, the prosecutor goes, look, I wasn't the person who started this. I came in and it was already happening. Now, the question, of course, is, if he comes in as the prosecutor, this is part of his job. So he's got to do something. So he said, even though disciplinary matters regarding civil service employees are very difficult, particularly those that may lead to termination, there is no excuse for us taking so long to complete our investigation as has been done in this case. I apologize for that. So that's a good thought. Going forward, he said, things will be different. We are instituting written policies and procedures with best practice timelines to ensure that all internal investigations are done in a timely manner so a situation does not happen again. So let me give you an example here. The person at the center of the story, the worker, was a former deputy sheriff, began working for the prosecutor's office in April of 2018. Almost immediately, there were discrepancies in his mileage reporting. So you can turn in your mileage, say, I was driving around today for work, here's the mileage I drove. His claims for reimbursement contradicted odometer readings captured during safety inspections, and he reported driving on days when he was actually working from home, again, according to records of the investigators. At the end of May 2018, for instance, he claimed an odometer reading of 29,645 miles. For the next day, he reported 31,645, suggesting that he'd driven 2,000 miles overnight. Now, I've driven long distances before, but 2,000 miles, unless you're doing the cannonball run, is going to take a little bit of time, and even then it would take some time. So a preliminary investigative report notes that Oahu has a shoreline of only 227 miles, and it takes about 4 hours to go around the island. So you had to drive around the island more than 8 times and taken about 36 hours to do it to drive the distance he claimed. The report states that, obviously, is impossible to do. The preliminary investigation found probable cause that he had falsified his mileage statements in 2018 and 2019 and then was overpaid because he was being paid for mileage he didn't incur. It recommended a full investigation. In a June 2020 letter, he was informed he would be investigated but was allowed to remain on regular duty. By October 2020, the prosecutor's office had prepared a report justifying his termination, saying that he had falsified 18 mileage reports between April of 2018 and May of 2020. So back in 2020, the report was, this guy should be terminated. He should be. And they'd come to the conclusion that he'd falsified these mileage reports and was therefore being overpaid. And somehow it took them until now to finally say, okay, tell you what, we're going to cut him loose. And so that's a serious issue. And so if there is some kind of systemic problem that they need to fix, you fix it. And, the interesting thing is we're talking about a prosecutor's office. Prosecutors' offices should understand how litigation works. And I'm simply pointing out a parallel that quite often litigation involves hard deadlines. If you do this, you got to file this here. It has to be filed here. What happens if you file it late? You lose. Now, if you file it late and you got a really good excuse, you might still lose. But you might be able to. But the point is, you say, look, if somebody is accused of wrongdoing, you hold a prompt investigation, you put a timeline in. Can you do it within 30 days? I mean, it appears that the collective bargaining agreement says that you can take somebody for unpaid leave for 30 days for, bad acts. Okay? If you can't get it resolved in 30 days, how about 60 days? How about the first 30 days, we take a look at it, and then there's a hearing within 15 days of that? I mean, there's all kinds of these kinds of situations built into the legal system. Most common one I can think of is drunk driving. In Michigan and many states, it says if you're arrested for drunk driving here, you must be arraigned by this date, you must have a pretrial by this date, and you must, if you go to trial, have the trial by this date. They don't want people dragging these things out. And so you can do that in a situation like this if you wanted to, and clearly they need to do it. So I got to salute the people at the Honolulu Civil Beat, Christina Jedra. Without their reporting, this might have gone on for another 5 years. Who knows? Talk about a great job. How much do you get paid? You tell somebody, whoa, what do you do? Nothing. Someone's paying you to do nothing? Yeah. It's great work if you can get it. So thank you to everybody who sent it to me. That's the update. Most people, I believe, are going to agree with this result. But the Honolulu County employee has been fired after nearly 5 years of paid leave, despite the fact there was a report written almost 5 years ago saying that he should have been let go back then. questions or comments, put them below. Let's talk to you later. Bye-bye.
Thank you for watching Lehto's Law. You can't have everything. Where would you put it?